So the points are locked for Super Rugby Pacific Round 5. It was a very high scoring round in contrast to last week, Chiefs disaster in Fiji. This week we had the Crusaders miracle in Christchurch. The boys just running in try after try after try. And the big story this week for me, Will Jordan and Sevu Reece. I used my co-captain one-off booster on both of them. Both of them racking up a good score and pushing me over that 800 mark for the round. But it wasn't all gravy. A few unlucky things and maybe a couple of bad decisions kind of took the edge off across the rest of my team. Leonard Brown, for example, big fat zero. He didn't actually play the game. He was named to start, but just before the game kicked off, he was scratched from the lineup. Rona came off the bench and replaced him. Leonard Brown disappeared from the 23. Rona did end up getting a try as well, a through the hands try. And same thing happened as well. Christian Leo Willie, very low score, 21, because he did actually get subbed off. Ethan Blackadder was named on the bench as the back row replacement. He got scratched late and was replaced by another guy who was on debut, who wasn't a 7, he's a number 8. He ended up replacing Christian Leo Willie. And I was really careful this week to look at who was getting subbed. That was one of the reasons I swapped off Tupaia and went to Leonard Brown, because I knew Tupaia, he was probably more likely to get subbed by Rona if Leonard Brown wasn't injured. And yeah, with Leo Willie, I mean, I thought that Ethan Blackadder would come on and replace the Crusaders 7, Tom Christie, but no, that didn't happen. He replaced Leo Willie. Leo Willie, though, I mean, it wasn't just about being subbed. The way that game was being played, and there's a lesson to learn here maybe, it was all about the backs. It was all about the back three. The Crusaders were carving through them, but yeah, it wasn't happening up front. They were finding the space out wide no matter what they did, and they just kept going back to that wow. So yeah, something to keep in mind going forward in these big blowouts. Maybe it's not gonna involve the forwards that much. He was my softest pick, and before I locked my team, I was thinking really hard about dropping him and bringing in another Crusader in the backs. It probably would have only been Havili anyway, instead of one of these Chiefs players here. Havili didn't have a huge game, got 30 or so points. I think that was the same for Braden Enner as well, the Crusaders 13. The real pick would have been to go for Macca Springer, who I think got over 120 with those 5 tries he ran in. That is an option I did identify in my best picks video. I did say it was viable to go for the big triple stack in the back three. I did not have the balls to do that myself. I just feel it's wrong to put all your eggs in one basket but like that. But again, maybe there's another lesson to learn here. When opportunities present themselves, grab them with both hands. There's gonna be more blowouts to come this year, and I might go for it. It's probably gonna blow up in my face. We'll see what happens. Something else that was a little bit unlucky as well, Charlie Cale in the back row. He was doing really, really well. Got his 40 points pretty much in the first half, and then really early in the second half, I'm not sure what happened, but he was not on the field. He disappeared very early. I believe he was injured with maybe a back spasm is what I heard, but yeah, he was on target for a monster score. He wouldn't have been subbed. On the bench was was Luke Reimer, and yeah, he would have replaced Rory Scott instead of Charlie Cale if there wasn't any injury. So yeah, Charlie Cale, he was on target for a huge score, but that just didn't pan out in the end. Harry Wilson doing pretty well though. I did invest in that Reds game. You can see I had Dalguno as my third outside back option as well, and he was a real bust. That Reds game, it just didn't quite play out the way I thought. I thought the Reds would crush the Tars, and they did in the end. But the way they did it, it was more through the forwards than in the backs. I think there was only one backs try, the rest were all forwards try. So yeah, the nature of that game, it was a pretty sound beating, but it wasn't like that Crusaders game where they were running through them and just finding space everywhere and carving them up. So maybe there's something to do more with how the Reds play. Maybe that's just because it wasn't as much of a mismatch. Interested to hear other people's thoughts about that and how we can kind of interpret that going forward with these teams. Anyway, looking at who the big movers and shakers were across the whole round this week, we've already talked about that Crusaders back three absolutely tore it up in this matchup. Len Ikitau was next cab off the rank, and this was a bit bolt out of the blue for me. Len Ikitau, we've always known that he's good, but yeah, he hasn't really been up to a lot this year. Maybe some of that's related to a bit of a shaky start from the Brumbies, although they have sort of started to turn it around a bit in New Zealand. And yeah, he just went crazy in this Ndrua game, scored 3 tries. Couple of them were kind of fortunate to go his way, I think, but yeah, I'm not sure how much Ikitau's stock moves up after this performance. Got to put him back onto the radar, especially because the Brumbies, they do look like they're building a bit. But yeah, I'm still not sure if he's going to be a consistent performer from here on out. Caleb Tangitau though. Caleb Tangitau, he has really emerged as a very strong operator, not just on the pitch, but in terms of fantasy as well. He got 77 points this week, just 1 try, but the reason he's really moving up the ranks in my books is because the way he's playing is very heads up. He is actively looking for opportunities, and he's going and looking for the ball, getting himself involved and trying to make those things happen. He's not staying on the wing and waiting for the ball to come for him. He's going out there and he's getting it and he's making it happen. So yeah, he really got rewarded for that week. He's playing with so much confidence right now. And yeah, he's in the Highlanders' slightly weaker team, but in those matchups where they're not going to get crushed, he's always going to be a live option, and he's especially going to be a good option in those matchups, probably against the bottom half of the table as well. Tom Wright, he was the other big mover and shaker in that game with the Brumbies crushing the Drua. And Tom Wright, I was really bullish on him before the start of the season. I was kind of disappointed how things went for him after that though. I mean, he did get a pretty decent score against the Western Force, but yeah, he's kind of reminded everybody that he's still there, he's still a live option. Didn't actually get a try, but still racked up plenty of points. He was full of running from the back, and he was heads up. He was looking to connect with his outsides. He was making those breaks. So very strong performance from him. He is definitely finding form, and he is back on the radar. Now, Corey Evans, this one is interesting because I did actually identify this guy as a good option in my best picks video, if you saw that last week. And the thing that attracted me to him was the fact that he was a midfielder on fantasy, but he was starting the game at fullback. And yeah, I keep saying this, the outside backs, they do have a lot more opportunity to score those points than the midfielders generally do. And yeah, we can see it here. I wasn't brave enough to pick in this game just because, you know, Chiefs versus Blues, that's a tough matchup. Probably not going to be a huge amount of points on offer, and I was afraid he was going to get subbed possibly early as well because Perifetta was on the bench, as well as Cole Forbes. Both of those players play a lot of 15, but yeah, it didn't matter in the end. Great game from him. And Mark Talia as well. Again, another player in a tough game, just racking up a really good score. And look, we all know how good Mark Talia is, not just on the pitch, but in fantasy as well. He just he just goes into traffic where it looks like there's no way through, and he just finds himself on the other side somehow. We don't know how he does it. He just walks through like 5 guys, and he wiggles and shakes a bit, and then he's on the other side. It's a line break. It's a stack of tackle busts, and yeah, I mean, he did that this game. Not a huge amount of opportunities, but just enough, and that's really all he needs to get these big scores. And you know what? I do think the Blues are starting to turn the corner just a little bit. It's happening slowly, but I think it is happening. And yeah, I'm going to start paying more attention to these Blues games. They do have another tough match next week against the Crusaders at Eden Park. But we'll see if they go well in that game. If they put the Crusaders away, I mean, it might be safe to say that the Blues are back. And yeah, it's time to start taking them a bit more seriously. Taking a slightly closer look at each position now as well. I've already remarked on a lot of these outside backs near the top. Just another thing to note, Tavatafa Nawai, super solid, but I keep saying this about him, like he's playing out of his skin, but it's not resulting in a huge amount of points. And it is because he is in that midfield. You don't get those tries being scored, and that's sort of what's holding him back here. Hard to call him a terrible pick when he's getting like an average of 38 or whatever, but yeah, with those outside backs, like we want to go for those guys that are going to get those 60 plus scores each week. Well, not each week, but in that week in particular. And yeah, Tawatawa's not that guy. Still 15% of people selecting him. Yeah, really still not convinced that this is a good choice. Interesting, Corey Toole and Andy Muirhead. These guys did decently in that decent match against the Draw, but yeah, it's really hard to separate Toole, Muirhead, and Tom Wright. Tom Wright was the big beneficiary this week, but yeah, Corey Toole, generally he's my preferred pick for the Brumbies, but yeah, it's a bit off and on. It's a little bit boom bust. Makes it really hard to make a choice in those Brumbies games. Ruben Love, he's a guy I'm pretty big on. I was big on his return last week, but again, the score of 36 with 1 try. Not terrible, but not the greatest either. So yeah, maybe cooling my jets a bit on Ruben Love. Naholo was the Hurricane who benefited the most this week, but yeah, again, he's the most boom bust out of all of them. He's one of those guys, he just sort of stays on his wing, and the ball either comes to him or he doesn't. The guy I did actually like in the Hurricanes back 3 was Nani Punawai, but this week he had that sickening head contact that saw him removed from the park. That happened very early in the game, so it would have been disastrous for your fantasy if you did pick him. And yeah, that was really gross. He's probably not going to be back for a while after that one, unfortunately, so hope he's okay. And moving on to the midfield, we talked about Ikitau and Evans. They were the 2 big movers in the midfield. Rare to see people in the midfield rack up points like this, but obviously Evans wasn't in the midfield. And yeah, then we sort of get this glut of guys in that 30 to 40 range, which by the standards of the midfield is still pretty good, but yeah, in general, not a lot going on here. I thought Havili and Enel would do well just because we knew the Crusaders were going to crush the Force, and they did alright, but I mean, it wasn't like anything spectacular. And yeah, you've just got a lot of guys in here who are kind of solid and probably couldn't have gone wrong with any of them. I end up going for Yosefo Masi. I'm a big fan of his from last year. He was just so good. He was a stats machine. This year, not a lot going on. He did go off injured in this game in round 1. This was his first game back, and he tried to get involved, but it was just a tough game for the Enduro. I thought they might get a bit more play this game. He was my only Enduro pick, but yeah, it just didn't happen. I haven't given up on him though. The Draw, they do take on the Force next week, albeit in Perth, but I expect they'll go a bit better next week, and we'll really see those valuable players of theirs stand up a bit, and I'm hoping one of them will be Marcy. That might be a bit of a last chance saloon for him in my book, but we will see. Yeah, fly half and midfield, I mean, Roygat and McKenzie, they really are the only game in town when they're playing. Faliafanga came off the bench and actually got a pretty good score with that one try. But yeah, not a lot to talk about here. Back row is kind of interesting. Not a lot of huge scores here. My two main picks, Harry Wilson and Kale, they were about as good as it got. Harris, he did come out on top with that big run he did in that game, got a try from it. But yeah, the next cab off the rank for me, if it wasn't Leo Willie, it probably would have been Mick Wright. Missed out on a few points here, but yeah, a little bit of a muchness here. The Hurricanes back rowers were probably the other ones I would have looked at. Karifri and Lakai, I mean, they basically got the same amount of points, but just not huge scores in the back rows happening this week. And with the locks, as usual, they remain a bit of a mystery. Tupo Vai, he has emerged as my favorite lock out of everyone. Did get a try this week, which really pushed him up to the top, but otherwise he seems to be quite solid. Cam Christie was my other pick. He was a bit of a bust this week. Oh wow, I mean, in reality, you're missing out on maybe 10 points. Tom Hooper, he actually, if you watch that Brumbies draw game, he was extremely impressive. He was huge, just with ball in hand and on the other side of the ball as well. He's another guy, he's in the lock position, but he actually plays a lot of 6, so he's another guy that I probably will consider if I like that Brumbies matchup, and if you know, Rory Scott or Luke Reimer's on the bench, it means he probably won't get subbed. So yeah, he's definitely a guy I will be looking at closer going forward. And with hooker, we're actually getting top of the table, 2 guys coming off the bench, Moananu and Kanaveri. And yeah, basically both these guys came on, they were full of running, and just the way things panned out, they you know, got a lot of points. Moananu was just, yeah, line break assist, like he was just having a whale of a time out there. I went for Cody Taylor in the hope that the Crusaders, you know, they might end up getting a more try or 2, just outmuscle the force, but yeah, that didn't happen. And interestingly, this year, just in general, there isn't a huge amount of more tries being scored. Every team, including the ones down the bottom of the table, do seem to be able to defend the maul pretty well. So yeah, maybe this hooker position, it's time to stop thinking about more tries and just go for the guys that are solid. There was no Riccatelli this week, but his replacement, Kurt Eklund, 43 points. I mean, not bad, not through the roof, but the thing I really liked about his performance is that there was no line out errors whatsoever. Yeah, just a perfect sheet for line out throwing. And with those line out errors, if you bungball a line out, it's not just -2, but you miss that +1 you would have got for it as well. So it's actually a 3-point differential, and those can really add up if you get more than one of them. And yeah, I wasn't sure how Eklund would go. He doesn't get a lot of game time these days. He didn't get a lot of game time last year just because Riccatelli, he was in good form. He was a preferred option. But yeah, to just show up and play one game like that and be really solid, maybe he is going to be that Mr. Solid Riccatelli replacement. And if the Blues really are turning the corner, they're probably the one team that is a better shot at getting more tries than anyone else. So yeah, Eklund, he is putting himself firmly on the radar. I was a big fan of his before the season started, but they just started benching him after round 1, like just benched like 4 games in a row, and the guy replacing him, Tanguy Tama, he's not that great. But yeah, I don't know, maybe they just want that impact from a Kanaveri off the bench. Maybe they want his leadership to just keep things steady at the back end of the game. I'm not sure what it is, but I hope he does get more starts, because that would really firmly put him back on the radar as a picking option for me. Taukiaho, he did pretty good considering he came off the bench here. And yeah, I'm pretty big on Taukei'aho as well, so I'm keeping an eye on when he actually gets a start. Brodie McAllister started this week. I'm not a huge fan of Brodie, but yeah, definitely keeping an eye out for Taukei'aho. And the props, as usual, not a lot going on with the props. Numia, one of my picks, he was the #1 pick with a pretty meager 29. I was pretty down on the force props this week. I thought they wouldn't get a lot of scrum points, but it didn't seem to matter for Marley Pearce. Racked up a lot of tackles, got a few tackle busts, and interception as well, really carried him to the top of the table. So yeah, pretty dismal for everyone else below this as well. Even my boy Angus Bow, I'm sure he's the best prop, but yeah, only 18 points for him in that tough game. Scrum's just not going their way, really not getting him a lot of points to shift him to the high tiers. But look, at most you're missing out on like 5 or 10 points here, so yeah, you really just can't sweat it with these props. Anyway guys, that'll do it for my recap. Hope you had a good round, and I'll see you in the next one.